This week's video is a little different. This week we're going to be looking at some ideal technique and explaining why some of the drills and technique work that we do is relevant. I'll confess up front and say that I borrowed these models from SwimSmooth and that I'm in no way affiliated with SwimSmooth or a SwimSmooth coach. I just like the demonstration and the representation of what they are. It's a really good example of what's good technique. First up we have Mr. Smooth, and he's representing the classical high elbow 6-beat kick stroke. And looking at Mr. Smooth swimming in full speed, it looks pretty smooth and effortless, as it's supposed to be. However, if we slow it down and if we look at it from head on, we can see the alignment of the hand entry, which is something we've been working on over the last couple of weeks. And how it's aligned with the shoulders, how as the hand enters the water in line with the shoulders, and then as he extends and reaches forward, it's still in line with his shoulders. And then as he goes into the catch, that tracks down underneath the shoulder. The elbow is the widest point of the stroke, not the hand. Quite often when we see people trying to do high elbow catches under the water, we often see a nice high elbow, but we often see the hand out to the side. From a timing perspective, it's best to see from the side and when it's slowed down a little bit so that we can process everything. If we look at it and we can see the hand extending at the front of the stroke, it reaches forwards with the fingertips pointing slightly down, and the recovering arm is coming past his head at this point here. And at that point there, as that hand comes past his head, that's when the catch is really starting to kick off with the opposing hand. And it's really important to note that although the reaching hand has to extend in the water to hold water, it's never actually still. There's no flat spot or dead spot in the stroke. It's pretty much continually moving. A more advanced aspect of the timing is to include the kick into the equation. And in this example, he's using a 6-beat kick. And if we look at the point where the catch begins with his left hand, we can see his right leg is just beginning the downward stroke. So that at the very beginning of the catch is on the opposite hand to the downward leg. Now if we look at this Miss Swinger, which is a different sort of stroke, and it's noticeably different, two key areas: the higher hand recovery over the water, or a straight arm recovery, depending upon which way you want to look at it, and a very low kicking rate with a 2-beat kick. From above, we can also see that with that straight arm, it's also a wide arm recovery, which gives a little bit more clearance over the surface of the water, and means in an open water situation, you're not as likely to clip your hands on waves or ripples on the water. And this is what is considered a classic sort of open water stroke. From a timing perspective, however, there's actually a lot of similarities between Mr. Smooth and Miss Swinger. And if we slow it down and look from the side and look at the catch and the recovering arm, the timing is very similar. So just as that hand is reaching out to the front of the stroke, the opposing hand is coming past the head. It is slightly different, but not a lot. If we look at it from the front, we can see that the hand is entering shoulder width apart and extending out in front, and then catching with that slight bent elbow and down the midline, or just off the centre of the midline, underneath the side of the swimmer. Although at first glance it doesn't look like the swinger is actually rotating as much as Mr. Smooth, however we can see that it's still around that 45 to 50 degrees at the shoulders, but because the kick is much lower rate, then there isn't quite as much rotation from the hips, and therefore there's a bit more tension through the abs as, for instance, the right arm is extending. So with the kick on this 2-beat kick, we can see here the right hand is entering, and we can see the left leg is just kicking down. As the right hand catches, the left leg is going up and the right leg is coming down. So it's on the actual propulsive phase of the stroke that the catch is made with the downward stroke of the kick. Some people find it easier to think of things in slightly different ways. So for one person, it might be as my right hand enters, my left leg is going down, but another person might think as I pull with my right hand, my right leg is going down. This requires a very good core control to prevent the legs and hips from sinking, because there's not a lot of pressure down on it with such a long interval between kicks. But if it's done well, it can save considerable amount of energy because you're not using your legs at all, yet you're still enabling the timing and the rhythm of the stroke to be dictated by them. So this week, we're going to be doing a little more paddle and full stroke work, with you thinking more about your alignment and lots of the drills that we've done previously, but with a slightly different slant on them. It's also very useful to be able to visualize what you want to try and do and what you could do, and you could do that by looking at one of the two models that's sort of most appropriate for you, and then thinking about what you do in your stroke. Most of you have had comments from us about the key areas that you're working on, and you can think about that in the context of the ideal stroke. Another way of looking at this is to actually think about it by looking in the mirror, by standing, as I do on poolside when I'm demonstrating, and actually doing that in front of the mirror, and then you can see what you do and then see how that feels when you're actually in the water. Just remember though that these are ideal perfect strokes. Mr. Smooth and Miss Swinger are models of great technique, but real swimmers don't all look exactly the same. There's often some aesthetic differences between them, so don't get too hung up on trying to imitate them perfectly. But what those top level swimmers do is they have the fundamentals are in place. So the things like the timing, the rotation, the catch and the alignment are all very, very similar, but the fluff, the dressing around it can look a little different. So enjoy, catch you this week. See you later, guys.